Have you ever had a moment that made your skin crawl? A shadow where there shouldn't be one? A whisper in an empty room, or something you simply can't explain? If so, we want to hear from you. Here at the Haunted UK podcast, we're always on the lookout for spine-tingling stories to feature in our end-of-season listener episodes and our short haunt series. Whether it's a chilling encounter, a mysterious experience, or something that's haunted you for years, we want your tale. Send your story to contact us at hauntedukpodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media: Facebook, X at Haunted UK Pod, TikTok and Instagram at Haunted UK Podcast, or visit our website www.hauntedukpodcast.com. Now, if you love what we do and want even more haunted goodies, then you can support the show on Patreon and Ko-fi. We've got 2 brilliant tiers, Possessed and Spooked, both packed with bonus content, exclusive episodes, and extra material that'll keep you up all night. But that's not all. We've launched a brand new sister podcast, Haunted UK Fiction, and we're calling all storytellers. Whether you're a published author, an aspiring writer, or someone with a natural gift for spinning eerie tales, we're looking for original fictional short stories and novellas with strong paranormal or supernatural themes. Think suspenseful, mysterious, atmospheric, terrifying, thought-provoking, even darkly magical. If your story is selected, we'll professionally narrate, record, mix and master it into an audiobook-style format, then feature it on the show. You'll get a copy of the finished production to use however you like, and you'll retain full ownership of your work. Submit your story to hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com and follow us on Instagram at hauntedukfiction. So whether it's truth or fiction, if it's haunted, we want it. Now, sit back and enjoy the episode. This is the Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts. Welcome, dear listeners, to our series of short haunts. A shot of scary, just for you. So grab a hot chocolate, maybe a tea, maybe something stronger, because this is Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts. The Presence in Theatre 3. There's something about encounters with the paranormal from those who work in the emergency services. Many of those in this exclusive group of workers have most likely seen sights and had experiences which many of us just wouldn't cope with. And we've been incredibly lucky enough to have had many stories and encounters from them. Which brings us onto our short haunt today. We all know that hospitals can be places of mixed emotions, seemingly endless miles of corridors leading to department after department, passing numerous doctors, nurses and porters on your travels. But have you ever thought about the countless numbers of those who unfortunately never make it out of hospitals? Those whose lives finally come to an end. With all that said, let's hand this over to our listener. I'm a more recent listener of the podcast and have been binging episodes whilst recently moving house. I wanted to get in touch to share a couple of stories that you may find of some interest. I'm intrigued as to what both yourself and maybe your listeners' opinions are on what might rationalize both of these events. I'm a 30-year-old theatre nurse now living in the north of England, and felt compelled to reach out after listening to a similar story to this from your listener story episode featuring a guy who was working in the operating theatres in the now demolished Greenwich District Hospital. I'll preface this by mentioning that whilst I was once a hardcore sceptic, after these experiences I would now describe myself as a sceptical believer. This story happened in a hospital in Derbyshire where I was working as a scrub practitioner in obstetrics, gynecology and paediatric theatres. This was a fairly large department comprising of 6 theatres separated by a double door into 2 areas: gynecology, obstetrics and breast theatres on one side and paediatric theatres on the other. Monday to Friday, this was a busy department when all theatres were working and had the usual hustle and bustle you might come to expect in a busy operating theatre department. Over the weekend, we had one team of 5 people present at the department to cover emergency obstetric procedures such as caesarean sections, for example. Some weekends had quite a bit of downtime where others we'd be lucky to slurp a quick drink of tea. During the downtime periods, we'd make use of the time by taking a theatre each and completing necessary tasks, such as checking expiry dates on products, setting up equipment for planned theatre lists, and occasionally getting together to share a packet of biscuits in the break room and discuss current affairs. I'd been working with this team for maybe 2 years when I was working the weekend shift, and the 5 of us got onto the subject of ghost stories and mentioned the presence in Theatre 3. I'd never felt anything particularly untoward in this theatre, but always did feel as though I was being watched. It was the only theatre that I would feel the need to play music in whilst in there alone, maybe to put a kind of explainable presence to that feeling of being watched. However, other staff members were sharing their own experiences of hearing disembodied voices and witnessing things moving or going missing. In the scrubbing room, there were 2 wide shelves with different sizes of packed sterile theatre gowns, maybe about 2 meters up, attached to the wall. One of the nurses mentioned that there had been multiple times she had been alone in Theatre 3 prepping for a list, and she had jumped out of her skin as the gowns had thrown themselves off the shelf and slid along the floor. Another nurse shared her experience of hearing her name called in the room when she had been in there alone but had been too frightened to wait to find out who or what it was. It was mentioned that this Theatre 3 presence was so feared that the cleaning staff would clean the theatre in 2s, as they were too frightened to be in there on their own, corroborating that they too had witnessed packs of theatre gowns flying off the shelves. We had a bit of a laugh about this, and I thought to myself that this surely could all be rationalised. For instance, the gowns could have been stacked in a way that meant one could maybe slip off. The voices, perhaps primed fear, paired with an overactive imagination maybe. I didn't think too much more on it until maybe a week later. I was circulating in Theatre 3 in the middle of the week during a busy theatre list. This theatre had a small X-ray machine in the corner where we could get an instant imaging of tissue specimens during a procedure. This was in the early afternoon, and there were a full team of 7 people in the theatre, including myself, 2 nurses, 1 healthcare assistant, 2 surgeons, 1 anaesthetist and 1 operating department practitioner. I was typing some details into the X-ray machine with my back to the theatre when very clearly I heard someone trying to get my attention with "Victoria, Victoria, Victoria," kind of in a similar way that a child might call their mum if the first 2 attempts didn't catch attention. I quickly turned around and replied, "Yes, what's up?" to be met with a very confused-looking and silent team. "Did you not just shout me like 3 times?" I asked. No one said anything," the healthcare assistant replied. It's very odd, I thought to myself, but carried on with my day. A couple of months later, I found myself back in Theatre 3 over a quieter weekend with another team member prepping for the upcoming list of patients. She was a very staunch old-school nurse that had been working in theatres since God was a lad. very experienced and very professional. She was on one side of the theatre and I the other, tidying up a whiteboard on the wall with my back to the room. It was at this point I felt someone, or maybe something, very clearly and definitely stroke the back of my neck with what could only be described as a disembodied finger in a downward motion. It even sent a shudder down my spine, and I felt the colour completely drained from my face. Even now, thinking about the experience, it makes my toes curl. I immediately turned around to tell the nurse to cut it out, as I was convinced, despite it being completely out of her character, that she had snuck up behind me and did this to make me jump. She was still on the other side of the room, looking very confused, about 15 meters away from me. There was no way she had done it, and there was no one else present. Or maybe there always was. Bizarrely, my second story begins at the very place the latter ends. I should offer an initial trigger warning for this. I will be discussing road traffic accidents, intensive care units, and medical trauma. My partner Miles and I began dating in August 2023. That year had been particularly turbulent for both him and his family, as they consecutively lost his stepfather and maternal grandparents all within a couple of months of each other, with his grandmother Betty passing on the 23rd of December 2023. January 7th, 2024 rolls around, and it's the eve of Miles embarking on a new adventure, playing with his band at a festival in Florida, America. Miles and I met up at his mother Diane's home in Doncaster and were sharing a Chinese takeaway and talking about how 2024 was going to be our year and a time for new beginnings. Oh, how wrong we were. Whilst Miles was away, my own mother and I spent a couple of difficult days in Devon at my grandfather's home. My grandfather can be a cantankerous, and you could say non-diplomatic man, and, well, you know how families can be sometimes. On returning home to sunny Derbyshire on the Tuesday evening, I was catching up with Miles over a video call, comparing our weeks. He'd asked how my grandfather was, and I recanted the tales, and rather cynically stated, "I suppose bad things come in threes. Whatever's next?" Miles jokingly replied, "My plane's going to crash and I'll die." I shut this down and told him not to tempt fate by joking about that kind of thing. Miles was flying home that evening, and there were reports of bad weather over Florida. With that in mind, my anxiety got the better of me, and that night I spent the wee hours checking flight trackers online, eagerly anticipating his safe landing at Heathrow Airport. On Wednesday the 10th of January 2024 at 8 a.m, I got a text. "I've landed. Just picking my car up and I'll be driving back to Doncaster." A slight caveat to this, a week before this day, Miles had just bought a new car, a people carrier, one which he envisioned driving in the band. It was complete with TVs in the back and a few additional creature comforts. A sure side better than his 1997 Honda Civic, which didn't have functioning airbags and more flashing lights on the warning panel than Blackpool illuminations. I drove to work that morning assured that Miles was safe, and mentally preparing for extensive surgery we had planned for that morning. The scheduled operation for that day can proceed for up to 14 hours, so as you can probably imagine, this requires a lot of moving parts and robust planning from multiple specialities to ensure everything goes ahead with minimal disruption. When I arrived and had begun triple-checking the equipment for the day, very unexpectedly, the surgery was cancelled and the theatre would be reserved for emergencies instead. Halfway through the morning, a colleague was asking me after Miles and how the festival went. I proudly showed some pictures on my phone of him doing his thing on stage, looking like a rock star, and at that exact moment, I received a number of texts from both his mum Diane and his best friend Max, asking me to call right away. I excused myself and made the call. "Vic, I'm so sorry. Miles has been in a car accident. He's been rushed to the nearest hospital and he's in a life-critical state in Oxford." I felt as though all of the air had been taken from my lungs, and the ligaments removed from my knees. I just collapsed on the floor in the corridor as I frantically flicked through my internal Rolodex of rational thinking for my next move, and coming up blank. I needed to get to Oxford, now. I found my manager, blurted out what had happened, and told them I was leaving and driving to Oxford right away, which I did, listening to Frank Ocean all the way in an attempt not to add numerous speeding fines to the immensely stressful situation that was already unfolding. Miles was intubated, in a coma-like state in the neurological intensive care unit with an extensive brain injury. If you've ever been into an ICU, it's an overstimulating attack on all 5 senses, surrounded by intimidating-looking machinery that beeps at you if you so much as look at it untowardly. I turned the corner of the unit and scoured the beds around the perimeter of the room. I couldn't see Miles until I locked my eyes onto a grey-looking figure with tattoos that matched his, hooked up to all the IV drips, monitors, and breathing tube mounts that come with the territory. Diane, Miles's cousin Carrie, Auntie Della, and I didn't leave Miles's side, all of us watching his monitor with eagle eyes, praying for no deviations to the numbers, whilst the immortal words, critical but stable, were continuously reeled off whenever we asked how he was. In 7 days' time, Miles was due to read his grandmother Betty's eulogy at her funeral back in Doncaster. This was never going to be a possibility. So Carrie and Della both made the journey back to show solidarity for their grandmother, mother, and read the eulogy on Miles's behalf while Diane and I stayed next to Miles. That evening, Carrie returned to Oxford with their grandmother Betty's rosary beads and placed the delicate beaded chain around Miles's breathing apparatus, telling him that she was with him. The next evening, we were at the Airbnb when Diane received a phone call from her friend Paul, who'd been regularly checking in to see how we all were, especially Diane, who had of course only recently lost her husband, both parents, and now her only son was on life support. He went on, "The strangest thing happened today. I was servicing a boiler in Lincolnshire at this old couple's house when the wife came over and told me, 'Oh, come sit down, love. You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders.' She told me she had a gift and that I had a friend who was going through an awful time at that moment." This, of course, had us all very intrigued. She said, "He's going to be all right, you know. Elizabeth is with him. She's grateful for the rosary on the breathing tube. Her dad is with her too." We all stood dead in our tracks, just looking at each other in disbelief. "I suppose it doesn't mean anything. I don't know any Elizabeth, but it was a nice thought," Paul said. "My mother's name is Elizabeth," Diane replied. "No, your mother's name was Betty," Paul argued. "Yes, as in short for Elizabeth," Jane retorted. Carrie and Della were at the funeral that morning, then returning back to Oxford the very same day, and swore blind that the only people who knew about the rosary beads next to Miles were the 4 of us. The woman who was having her boiler serviced lived in a different county, had never met Paul prior to this, and he hadn't attended the funeral either. I simply cannot explain or rationalize this. The bizarre coincidences from the surgery unexpectedly being cancelled, leading to me being able to see the initial messages, to Miles only buying a safe car a week before. I can only say that all of us took comfort knowing that when we couldn't be there for Miles, Betty was standing watch. Just for a roundedness to this tale, Miles made an almost miraculous recovery, and we are living together very happily in the north of England with our 2 lovely cats. Very grateful and blessed for every day we have. Absolutely love the podcast and look forward to deep diving into more episodes soon. Thank you for taking the time to read. Kindest regards, Victoria. And that is where we bring this short haunt to a close. But how do we even go about trying to rationalize what went on in Victoria's story? How do we even begin to explain all of those completely separate events which enabled so many things to work, in a sense, in favour of Victoria and Miles. And then there's the old lady in Lincolnshire, innocently having a new boiler fitted by Paul, a friend of Miles's mother, Diane. He had no knowledge at all about the placement of those rosary beads, and he didn't even realise that Diane's mother's real name was Elizabeth. But there's something else which intrigues me about this story, about the sequence of events which took place. What was the presence in Theatre 3, and could it have been possible that whatever or whoever it was could have followed Victoria to Oxford to help out from the other side? Whilst these events seem unrelated at first, is it too much of a jump to consider the possibility the presence in Theatre 3 could have played some sort of role in how all of these coincidences fell into place? As we've said so many times on this podcast, we'll probably never know. But without doubt, the most important thing about this whole series of events is that Miles made a recovery, and that both he and Victoria are happy. So the next time you find yourself in a situation where everything seems to be going against you, maybe just have a little faith in the possibility that forces and powers way beyond our control and comprehension could come to the rescue, and that the next person who could be helped could be you.